Hi, my name is John. I've been with Apixio for about 6 years. My background, and much to the chagrin of my colleagues and teams that I manage, is that I'm a pretty hands-on computer scientist. I actually help build this stuff because I really love building, the building software and making it real. I just want to put my AWS plugin right up front. What you're about to see is all built on AWS from day one. I was one of these early adopters that was pushing my machine image up to the cloud from my office PC, and around 2005 going, this is crazy, this will never work. And now I've got thousands of machines that go up and down every day, right? And without AWS, I don't know how this whole thing would be possible, right? There's no way that we could have succeeded in the way and the magnitude we did without it. So thank you, AWS. Apixio, so it's kind of a portmanteau of sorts, right? API meets in and out. I don't know what the original founders were thinking, but they thought, like, it started with A, that's really good, right? We're a tech company. Half of us are engineers and scientists. Our vision is really to bring augmented intelligence, not AI, like we're going to replace jobs, augmented intelligence into the healthcare workflows that are meaningful. We've started in the back office. You'll see some of the use cases where we're really just focused on helping with the rev cycle, and we're pushing into the clinical side, which you might consider the front office. And we want to bring augmented intelligence through all those workflows to make healthcare work better. To do this, we've built a machine that takes in data, clinical data, and we're going to talk about that electronic phenotype. And it puts it into a system, right, that's got normalized data on which we can do meaningful machine learning. All right, so the talk, phenotyping. Deep phenotyping is a term that's been popularized by a guy named Eric Topol in a book that he just put out. If you haven't read it, don't feel bad, Deep Medicine. He's also the author of another book called The Patient Will See You Now, which is about the transformation in the healthcare system caused by digital disruption, right? In this book, he's got this idea of a deep phenotype. Now, I argue with this idea of phenotype and genotype being on the same slide, right? Because I'm kind of an old school guy, and I thought that, the genotype was, where you started, and phenotypes are how it's expressed when it meets the environment and your own life, right? But what he does is he lays out everything here from an exposome, which, by the way, I didn't know either. That's all of the crap in the environment that you're exposed to, hence exposome, all the way through the stuff that's biological to the stuff you started with, your initial traits in your genome, right? And then he starts in with the stuff that we've really been talking about, imaging, biosensors, and, oh, by the way, the social graph, right? And there's another company here who kind of coined the phrase, the behaviorome. Maybe it wasn't theirs, but that sort of right side is sort of like, what do I do during the day? How can I track that? But how much of this is real, right? Certainly, all of that stuff that you just saw there is the future, right? We can and do actually look at data from, your microbiome, your exposome, right? People, in specialty cancer labs and definitely the moonshots like GRAIL or human longevity actually do have at their disposal the techniques to actually take all those things you saw on the previous slide and do something meaningful with them. But in our own lives, and if you look at the way that healthcare is managed now, imaging is very real. Imaging is a huge part of the market. In fact, we probably do too much imaging. But what can we do with that in the sense of, machine learning? Well, there are actually companies right now. I think Arterys is one. Another one is Viz.ai. Arterys is an FDA-approved application for taking images of the heart, and Viz.ai, brain scans looking for stroke. Yesterday, an attendee showed me her application. She's got something, contrast reagent meets imaging, and I can diagnose Parkinson's. That's real today, right? Biosensors are a thing. All of us, NIH and Fitbit, 1 million people. Let's see what behavior studies are there. Evidation Health, they have 3 million subscribed users that, are either phone or watch users, and they're involved, right? If you look at Companies like Ginger.io, Evidation Health, again, they actually look at the interaction that in terms of words and your behavior, how you can actually look at your mental health. But these are still really small parts of a very large data set that are being mined for very particular things, and they're the future, again. They're not really what's available to us today, right? So what's really missing here is all of the data that is captured for every patient in every encounter, right, that they have with the medical system today. And electronic phenotype is just taken from the fact that we have electronic medical records, which is a crazy old word, right? It's probably as useful now as like HIPAA is, right? Because it's dated, right? And maybe digital phenotype is a fair representation here, but what's missing from, Eric Topol's slide is that we today get billions of transactions every year with patients interacting with their healthcare system, and it's captured today. It's captured in these encounter notes. These encounter notes have been a standard for something on 60 years, right, based on something called a SOAP note, Subjective Objective Assessment and Plan, right, which was popularized by a guy named Larry Weed in the 1950s, right? So there is data in our systems today that you can use, right, that will have information like I measured the blood pressure of this individual and it was, 120/70, right? That information's there. It's just not regularly available in some sort of application or to the folks like us that maybe do machine learning. Right? There's also the claims feeds that come, and that's the stuff that's always been there. That's like your information bus that runs the healthcare system forever, right? So that's your CPT codes, your ICDs, and other diagnostic codes that come through, right? Unfortunately, right, it's a mess, right? And there's no real standardization there, right? As everybody jokes, if you've seen one claims file, you've seen one claims file, right? And there's new data here too that's also part of the clinical record. A lot of the social determinants of health are actually put in the record by a physician, right? Patient lives alone, social determinant of health, right? Has access to transportation or not, social determinant of health. All that information exists today. I can also go to TransUnion and suck in another 500 dimensions, right, that they all claim are useful, right, that I can add straight into this phenotype today, right, and start to get a real picture of what people, right, have about, what we know about people rather, and the data that we have about them. And this creates this rich longitudinal record, right, that we don't have to wait for. We have it today, right? This rich longitudinal record is filled with things that are useful to us. Latent labels, so hey, you want to label stuff, guess what? There are a whole bunch of labels just hiding out, waiting for you to find them. And those labels are often things we call outcomes, right? How well did the patient thrive after the surgery, right? You can get that information from the record. It's there. Now, you can't just expect that there's a field that you can reach in and pull out. It doesn't exist. It's not there. But if you have a whole bunch of machine learning, right, you can actually go in and pull that information out. So what we've done is, built a platform. I'll show you how we built it and what that looks like in a second. But why is this phenotype useful? Well, we know that the world of healthcare data, not great. It's messy, it's lossy, it's noisy, right? The platforms that might bring this all together are few and far in between. The guys from Redox, making a nice business trying to actually equilibrate that data between different providers, right? And if you're a machine learning person especially, right, or a company that really does require this richer longitudinal record, you're kind of out of luck because that's not what EHRs do. EHRs are a point of sale system meets an ERP system. They're there to help you manage your business and get paid. They're not there to do machine learning on. They're not there to understand the true nature of the patient. And that's where we stepped in. So this is what we've built. I'm somewhat proud of it. I just have to say the small team that started doing this and the somewhat larger team that's working on this today have really set out to build something that's durable and scalable. While our customers see a nice little enterprise app and are like happy with their web app and the reports that we give them, the internal folks live for this. And what we've put together is a front end that can take data in from any number of sources. So as I was saying to the guys from Redox, I routinely get large providers just dumping their entire database onto an FTP site, and then I have to parse it and make use of that. Equally crazy is the plans who don't have access to the EHR. What they get is they get the right to pay someone $15 to go push a print button, create a PDF file, and send it to me. This is insanity. So that whole front end is built to understand all of this different variety and sources, pull the data out, right, in its rawest format, normalize it as best we can up front, and shove it into databases. That little thing you see for OCR represents our technology that we developed. It's all based on open source, but technology we developed to automate that process and get that data out and get it into our databases. That little bit in the middle, this is our normalized patient model, right? If you've ever looked at or cracked the HL7.3 clinical document architecture, you know what was going on in our minds when we built that. But importantly, right, it's a model that's addressable logically, like this is an encounter or a location or a provider, right, you know, or a problem, right? And it's physicalized, meaning I've actually thought through with my team, how would I build this so that it could scale to not, you know, when we started, hundreds of thousands of patients, but now tens of millions and perhaps even hundreds of millions of patients, and how would I build that thing in AWS so that I could build it in a scalable way and not go out of business? Because, you know, as the CTO, one of the things I have to worry about is how do I do this without going broke? And then on the back end of that is an enterprise workflow system. And it just looks like any other enterprise workflow system. It's a multi-tenant SaaS app, and people log in. It's got simple single sign-on. I mean, I'm sort of glossing over how hard it is to build one of those. But again, that all set out, and right now we're moving into a, you know, fully scalable, you know, footing, you know, using Kubernetes and all sorts of new stuff that, you know, is now available in AWS, so that when I need to scale that out by another 1,000 users or whatever it's going to be, that's not a problem. Interestingly, in the world of healthcare, it's a very asymmetrical relationship between the data and the users. Thousands of users could be a lot of people in healthcare. The amount of data that's behind those thousands of users is far larger than the amount of data that you would expect, you know, for any user in a normal app, right? It's a lot of data. So that platform is actually, you know, we used to have a little coffee mug we gave out, the old iceberg trope, right? It's actually true. There's so much technology that you need to have to build this platform that sits unseen, and then everybody just gets to see like three different web app pages, and they think, wow, it's just 3 different web app pages. What are you spending all that extra money on, right? Well, it's this platform to do machine learning on. Now, I just want to give a shout out to my science team, right? This is our version of SageMaker. So we've been doing this a pretty long time, right? When we saw SageMaker came out, we went, hey, we built that. And so what we've got is that database that's sat in the middle. We actually data mine that for the labels that I talked about. We bootstrap algorithms, right? We do active learning, same sort of story as the SageMaker guys. And we create a bunch of models that we then can put together with a business use case, which we'll talk about in a second. And then those models are refined over time. They get pushed to production through our deployment system. We harvest labels, which is the virtuous cycle we have going on in our business model. As people use our product as directed, that gives us more labels, which improves our models, right? And that whole system is somewhat automated. We run something like 150 models right now, and those models can be completely retrained and deployed today in about 2 weeks. There's still a lot of work going on there, and it's just a matter of time and, you know, scale. So at some point, we might be able to get enough machines deployed at one time that we could actually do that in a matter of days. It's 150 models and growing. All right, so there's a lot of stuff you can do once you have that system in place. If you put your little patient phenotype at the middle where the Vitruvian man is, right, you can start to do things like benefit network design, case care management. utilization management, right? Prior auth. You can do the two things that we do right now, which are risk adjustment and quality metrics, right? All of that's possible when you have this platform in place. So we're going to double click on one of the use cases, right? So the title of the talk was about using, all this machine learning and this phenotype to do value-based care. And value-based care, for those folks that aren't involved in the healthcare system, is basically pay for performance, right? The prevailing modality has been and still probably is fee-for-service, where I can go into McDonald's and hit that cash register all day long and order as many hamburgers as I want. No one's going to stop me. That's kind of the way healthcare works. It's just the way it is. Value-based care says, hey, I'm going to pay you for one broken arm or one pregnancy. Here's the amount of money. You can take it or leave it, right? That's changing the way healthcare is performed. But there's one that I think that's even more interesting, and that's a risk-adjusted, capitated delivery of healthcare. There's a very big example of that in the wild. It's called Medicare Advantage. There's something on the order of 22 million Medicare enrollees getting their healthcare through Medicare Advantage. And the way this works is that a model that's statistically determined, right, allocates costs to particular types of disease categories. Every single person that I'm caring for will fall into one or more of those boxes. So diabetes, chronic kidney disease, heart failure, et cetera, right? Once I categorize all the people, I can then put dollar signs for premiums against them, and then I can go to CMS and say, I'm caring for this 500,000 people. Here's their disease burden. Please pay me my premiums. CMS says, sure, here's your premiums. And now the contract with the insurance company is, now you're on the hook. You're going to care for these people and keep them healthy. And if you do a good job, you might make a profit. If you don't do a good job, you're going to lose money. Guess what? This works. This is one of the most profitable things that insurance companies do. They just can't get enough of this, right? It's grown from about 12 million to 22 million people since we've been doing business. That's 6 years in this market. This is a fast-growing market. If you want to know what single-payer healthcare looks like where you don't destroy the healthcare system, this is it. It exists in the wild. But it requires care and feeding, and part of the care and feeding is accurate data. CMS doesn't want people, it's like fee-for-service. There's fraud. You can put fraud into the system just as easily. You can just overcode. Oh, yeah, all these people have some chronic disease. They don't. So CMS says you have to document this for me. A doctor has to say, physician has to write in a note, I have met with this individual, they have this disease, here's their plan, I'm monitoring. It's stuff like that. If it's not in a note, they can't put it into their basket of chronic conditions and it doesn't go into the premiums. So it's sort of a little bit of an accountability that CMS has added to this equation. And so what we come in and do is we say, well, we'll read through all of those clinical notes that your doctors have created, and we'll find all the places where it's properly documented that you maybe don't know about. But here's why that's important to my customer, is that 10% of these things fall through the cracks. 10% is all their profit. So they come in and say, man, can you help us find these cases where the doctor properly documented and we don't know about it? That's all done on that left-hand side. We have then the workflows where that's QA'd. QAing because the promise to CMS is that it's 95% accurate. It's actually pretty hard to get machine learning to be 95% accurate, so you do need some people involved. But that whole process now has gotten us to the point where we've analyzed last year 4.5 million charts. Now, a chart's not one encounter, it's 18 months worth of encounters for a patient, right? Just last year, we've been growing at about 50% a year for the last 5 years, right? Aggregate growth, right? We're pretty proud of this. We include 10 Blues plans, 15 large provider groups in that, and 4 of the largest health plans, right? All big names, because this stuff works. Now, this wasn't easy to do, but being very focused on building a good platform to do machine learning, being very focused on the machine learning got us to the point where we can actually deliver these results for these customers, and they're asking for more, right? The reason we're in quality isn't because we said, oh, quality. No, it's because our customers came to us and said, can you do quality? Right? We have the similar kind of problem. We just can't find people who have their blood pressure controlled or people who have had their A1C checked, et cetera. So how did this actually fare in terms of numbers, right? And I've got about 12 seconds. The key numbers here About 25% more codes found than humans. Capital T truth turned out to be much larger than our customers thought it was. Now, this actually, just so I don't get customers in trouble, we actually look both ways. So we're not just finding the false negatives. They actually ask us to point the gun in the other direction and find the false positives, and we can do that too, right? The machine learning doesn't care what question I'm asking, right? You just do 1 minus and it says, oh, by the way, I don't see evidence for this thing. And we do take stuff away, right? But net positive is really what's going on here. This is the magnitude of the difference in understanding the truth about the patients in the population, about 23%, right? And in doing this, they spent about 80% of the effort. It's pretty important. These folks that do this coding are highly trained people. They're nurses. They might even be physicians. Certainly, the cost per hour for somebody doing coding for some of these things is like $100 an hour. If you can reduce that by 80%, you've reduced your cost. But more importantly, what you've done is you've actually made it possible to do a lot more work. And we can actually put these people to other uses like professional labeling, right? So a pretty good result from our point of view and our customer's point of view. The ROI is there, the goods are there, right? And so we're moving now from risk adjustment to quality and around that circle that you saw before. All right, that's it for this talk.